American isolationism in 1930s. Isolationism is a technique or an approach of foreign policy in which a state remains isolated. In simple words, a state does not involve in global conflicts or any regional conflict and keep itself apart from those conflicts and isolated. Such an approach of foreign policy is called isolationism, and America followed the isolationism policy in 1930s. In fact, in the beginning as well, America was following the isolationist policy. However, during the period of First World War, it was involved in some conflicts as well. Um, but after First World War, in the period between wars, America again remained isolated. Uh, During World War One, President Woodrow Wilson made a case for U.S. intervention, uh, but for much of 19th century, the expense of Atlantic and Pacific Ocean made it possible for U.S. to enjoy free security and U.S. detached from old war conflicts. However, during World War One, President Woodrow Wilson made case for U.S. intervention in conflict and U.S. interest in maintaining peaceful war. Uh, and later on, the isolationists or the supporters of isolationism say that the U.S. interest in that conflict is marginal. The marginal, the UN, yes, the U.S. Marginal U.S. interest in that conflict did not justify the number of U.S. casualties. So they again start supporting isolationism, and in 1930s, once again, America became an isolated country. The major reason for following isolationism in 1930s was the Great Depression and the memories of tragic losses of World War One. Because of Great Depression, the desirable policy for a state was to concentrate on its domestic issues instead of involving in global conflicts or regional conflicts. So this Great Depression became one of the major reason to make America isolated, and the memories, and especially the tragic memories of the losses of First World War, were present in the minds of American people, which forced them or which provoked them to remain separated or to remain apart from the global conflicts and non-entanglement entanglement in international politics. The supporters of the isolationism drew upon history. The leader, in his farewell address, President George Washington had advocated non-involvement in European wars and politics, and the supporters of isolationists uh, based their view on the history and especially the idea that was given by the George Washington. And the popular support and propaganda for the isolationism was also responsible to make America isolated in 1930s. For example, just at the revoke of First World War, a report was published by a well-known Republican senator from North Dakota called Gillette P. Nye. In the same in this report, he highlighted that how certain groups make profits from war, and the same views were given uh, by H.C. Engelbert and F.C. Hannigan in their book Merchants of Death, and that was published in 1934. And The War is a Rocket, published by Butler in 1935, who also explains similar views. So all these three major documents came in the same period. In 1934, Merchants of Death was published, and in 1935, War is a Racket was published. And these books and the writers propagated the isolationist ideology and motivated Americans, or psychologically prepared Americans to remain isolated, and they had not forgotten the memories of tragic losses of First World War as well. And because of those things, the public opinion in America was in favor of isolationism, so America remained isolated in 1930s. The Congress rejected USA membership in League of Nations. The Congress said that it would draw United States into European conflicts, and during 1930s League proved ineffectual in the face of growing militarism, and partially this growing militarism was possible because of US decision not to participate. If US had participated in League of Nations, perhaps it would help to minimize militarization in Europe. And the Stimson Doctrine also checked United States for involvement in global politics. However, this Stimson Doctrine was some shift, a policy shift as well. It was both. In fact, it was something that was checking United States from international involvement, as well as it shows some sort of international involvement as well. Actually, this doctrine or this law was given in 1931 because of Japanese invasion of Manchuria and subsequent push to gain control over northeast China in 1931. This event led President Herbert Hoover and his Secretary of State Henry Stimson to establish Stimson Doctrine. And the Stimson Doctrine said that US would not recognize territory gained by aggression and in violation of international agreement. US concern over the aggressive action without committing itself to any direct involvement or conflict. So US just shows their concern only without involvement or without active involvement in any global conflict, that they would not recognize any area or any territory gained by aggressive or aggression or by violating any international agreement. The same phenomena was applied to the Italian invasion of Ethiopia and Spanish Civil War also, and this resulted in virtually no official commitment or action from United States government. Roosevelt's inclination towards international involvement was checked by Congress. In 1930s, President Roosevelt proposed a congressional measure that would have granted the right to consult with other nations to pressurize the aggressors. The bill ran into strong opposition by leading isolationists in Congress, hence the bill was not passed. So the dream of the Roosevelt to talk with other nations to pressurize aggressors could not come true because the presence of isolationists in Congress was a big check on Roosevelt, and Roosevelt could not do so because for that he need Congress support, and Congress was not ready to support him since they were following the isolationist ideology. And in 1935, controversy over US participation in World Court also elicited similar opposition. And as the tension arose in Europe over Nazi Germany's aggressive maneuvers, Congress pushed through series of neutrality acts and checked or stopped America from involving in global conflicts or international conflicts. Roosevelt dominated over, but he could not stop those acts because he required congressional support, and Congress was not ready to support involvement. The isolationists were a diverse group. They were a diverse group. They were progressive, conservative, business owners, and peace activists. So it was a diverse group because they faced no consistent organized opposition from internationalists. Hence, their ideology trimmed time and again. Roosevelt appeared to accept the isolationist element in Congress until 1937. In that year, situation in Europe continued to go worse, and the Second Sino-Japanese War began in Asia. At the time, however, Americans were still not prepared to risk their lives and livelihoods for peace in abroad. Even the outbreak of war in 1939 did not suddenly diffuse the popular desire to avoid international entanglements. Instead, public opinion shifted from favoring complete neutrality to support United States aid to allies short of actual intervention in the war. Hence, United States signed number of lend-lease agreements with different countries. Perhaps the United Kingdom was the top at the top, and the this was a slight policy shift when United States signed lend-lease agreements with country from isolationism to international involvement. However, after the outbreak of the Second World War as well, the United States had not, or the United States was not involved in international conflicts. The surprise Japanese attack on the US Navy at Pearl Harbor in December 1941 served to convince the majority of Americans that the United States should enter the war on side of allies. Hence, the policy of isolationism came to an end on this moment in 1941 because of the Japanese attack on the US Navy. Hence, the policy of isolationism come to an end, and United States start involving in global or international conflicts, and the United States involvement policy is still continued. Thank you for joining. Take care. Goodbye.